All right, so we are jumping into a deep dive today that honestly feels like um, a massive plot twist in the whole AI world.
Oh, it really is a total paradigm shift from what we were hearing just a few months ago.
Right, and if you've been following the space, you definitely remember the absolute freakout last year when DeepSeek first dropped.
You couldn't escape it.
No, you really couldn't. The whole narrative was basically that this brand new player had arrived and they were doing things cheaper and faster and just undeniably better.
That was the dominant storyline for sure, the idea that pure efficiency was somehow beating raw computing power.
But then we get this new development that just completely flips the table on that entire narrative. Anthropic, the team behind Claude, dropped this report called Distilled Deception.
And they are really not pulling any punches with that title.
Not at all. They're essentially accusing DeepSeek, along with a couple other major players like Minimax and Moonshot, of achieving all those incredible results, not through some coding magic, but through straight-up theft.
It's a fascinating and honestly a pretty aggressive move by Anthropic. They're basically saying that these competitors built their models by copying Claude's homework on a massive scale.
And that is exactly what we're on a mission to unpack today for you. We're going to look at what the word distillation actually means in this specific context.
Because it sounds a lot nicer than what it actually is.
Exactly. We also want to look at the staggering numbers behind this accusation because the data they've presented is wild. And finally, we need to ask what this actually means for the global chip war.
Which is really the billion-dollar question here.
It is. But let's rewind a bit and start with the initial shock of that DeepSeek launch. Because to understand why this Anthropic claim is such a huge deal, you have to remember the atmosphere back then.
It was pure panic in certain sectors. I mean, the market reacted viscerally.
Right, like NVIDIA's stock took a genuine nosedive almost immediately.
It did. And you saw this prevailing sentiment everywhere, that American dominance in AI was just over.
People genuinely thought the hardware moat didn't matter anymore. Like, if you could just be smarter with your algorithms, you wouldn't need all those expensive American chips.
Exactly. It felt like this massive leap forward for competitors. Investors were completely spooked because the whole valuation of companies like NVIDIA is built on the idea that you absolutely need massive compute to get frontier intelligence.
Right, and if someone proves you can do it for a fraction of the cost, well, the gold rush is effectively over.
But now we have Anthropic coming out and saying, hold on a second, they didn't crack some secret algorithmic code.
Right, they're saying they just harvested the answers from us. Which brings us to this term that gets thrown around a lot, distillation.
Yeah, distillation.
I mean, we need to demystify this because the report uses this analogy of making whiskey.
Which I love, by the way. It sounds so artisanal and fancy. You picture this careful refining process.
Exactly. You picture wooden barrels and a master distiller. But Anthropic is arguing that in this specific context, it's not artisanal at all. It's just digital plagiarism on a massive scale.
Right, because in a standard legitimate setting, distillation is like a teacher and a student. You have a massive smart model, the teacher, and you use it to train a smaller, faster model.
And you usually have permission or licensing to do that.
Precisely. But what Anthropic claims happened here is that DeepSeek didn't have access to the underlying mechanics of Claude. They just had the chat box API, and they used it to extract the final outputs.
Which brings up that Scantron analogy from the source material, which I think is just the perfect way for you to visualize this if you're listening.
It really hits the nail on the head.
You have to imagine studying for months for a massive final exam. You know, you're reading the books, doing all the late night work, learning the actual concept.
Putting in the heavy lifting.
Right. And then you get to the test, and the person sitting right next to you just leans over, copies your entire Scantron sheet bubble for bubble, and gets an A-.
While completely skipping the studying part.
Exactly. Anthropic is saying, hey, we did the hard work, we did the studying, and DeepSeek just leaned over and stole the answers.
And to push that analogy even further, if you just copy the Scantron, you get the grade right then. But you don't actually possess the underlying logic.
You don't know why B is the right answer. You just know it's B.
Right. And in AI terms, that creates what we call a brittle model. It might look fantastic on a standard test, but if you push it into new territory, it falls apart because it never learned how to reason.
It just learned how to mimic the output.
Exactly. But here's the thing about mimicking something as complex as Claude. You need a staggering amount of data to make that mimicry convincing.
Which brings us to the actual scale of the operation detailed in this report, because this wasn't just, a few engineers writing a quick Python script to scrape some prompts over the weekend.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
This is the part that really elevates the story. Anthropic emphasizes this was an industrial scale operation.
The numbers are honestly hard to wrap your head around. They claim that 24,000 fake accounts were created.
24,000. Just pause and think about the logistics of that.
I mean, I really can't. I get frustrated when I have to do two-factor authentication for my own bank. How on earth are they running 24,000 accounts without triggering every security alarm at Anthropic?
That's where the industrial part comes in. You need serious infrastructure for that.
Hmm.
Residential proxies to rotate IP addresses, automated systems to bypass CAPI-CHs, programmatically verifying emails. It is a massive coordinated effort.
And what were those 24,000 accounts actually doing?
According to the data they were running, about 16 million exchanges to extract this reasoning data.
16 million.
Yeah.
We're not talking about simple questions like, what's the weather in London, right?
No, they needed the complex stuff.
Yeah.
The multi-turn conversations where the model explains its work. That chain of thought reasoning is the secret sauce that they were allegedly harvesting.
And again, the report isn't just pointing the finger at DeepSeek here. They specifically name Minimax and Moonshot as well.
Right, which tells you this wasn't an isolated incident. It looks like a systemic strategy across these major Chinese AI companies.
Which perfectly pivots us to the so what of it all, the geopolitics. Because if this is true, it completely shifts the narrative around the U.S. export controls.
It absolutely does. The whole point of the U.S. chip bans was to choke off the hardware supply so these companies couldn't train frontier models.
Right. And when DeepSeek launched, everyone pointed and laughed at the ban, saying, look, they don't even need your chips.
Exactly. It made the policy look totally ineffective. But if Anthropic is right here, if the only way these companies made their models work was by stealing from Claude, then it suggests they aren't actually as self-sufficient as they appeared.
So the chip bans might actually be working.
That's the logical conclusion. If they had the compute power to do the hard pre-training themselves, they probably would have. The fact that they resorted to this massive distillation effort suggests they hit a wall.
That makes a lot of sense. The bans are hurting them more than they are admitting publicly, so they're forced into these digital heist tactics rather than genuine ground-up innovation.
Right. It changes the picture. From China is out innovating us to China is highly dependent on our outputs.
Wow. Okay, so just to quickly summarize this incredible journey for you all, we started a few months ago with this widespread fear of American obsolescence in the AI race.
The panic over cheaper, faster, better.
Right. And now we're looking at a forensic report claiming that the only reason they got there was through an industrial-scale copying operation utilizing 24,000 fake accounts and 16 million exchanges.
It really is a complete narrative reversal.
It is. And before we sign off, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over based on all of this. If the cheaper, faster alternative is only possible by copying the expensive, hard homework of others, is the playing field actually leveling, or is it just an illusion?
That is the exact question every policymaker and tech CEO needs to be asking themselves right now.
Absolutely. Well, as always, keep a critical eye on those breakthrough headlines and stay curious. We will catch you on the next deep dive.